My name is Cathy Galvin, and I am a journalist, a poet, and I run an organisation called The Word Factory. Word Factory, in my mind, was going to be, the reason I called it a factory, there were several layers to this. One was, every time I used to go into News International to work at the Sunday Times, I'd tell myself I was going into the Word Factory. So it's kind of that idea that there's no pretension behind it appealed to me. My dad, I grew up in Coventry in the West Midlands, and my dad worked in a tractor factory. And there's something about, I think this will sound awful, but there's a sort of nobility that's gone from working class life and the kind of sense that you had a place, be it in a factory or a mine or whatever it might be. So the factory idea stuck in my head, but I had an idea that the factory could exist on 3 floors. And I'd start off with the short story floor, because I'd learnt so much about the short story, and that there could be a non-fiction, journalistic floor and a poetry floor. So in 3 years we have the short story floor, and I also saw it, what I liked was the idea that you would come to it and you'd immediately meet the author, which is why everything is filmed. And then you'd find out about their work and you'd find out about their writing practice. I'd been at the Sunday Times for a long time and probably spent nearly 10 years as deputy editor of the Sunday Times magazine. And I don't have a literary background. I'm a feature writer and a features editor. But we were redesigning the magazine, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun to introduce a really great story, maybe once a month? And partly because I've always loved literature, but actually it was a more prosaic reason than that. I thought it would be great to attract a different category of reader to the magazine. Somebody who was really interested in great literature and great authors. And to my surprise, I got the go-ahead to start doing that, except it wasn't once a month, it was once a week. So for a brief period of time, I could commission anybody in the world that I wanted to write a short story. And that was wonderful, but the purpose of a newspaper is not to sell literature and authors in that way. So I realised that it needed to grow in a different direction. So we started to run a section called Fast Fiction behind the paywall, so that we could run stories and emerging writers online. And I had the good fortune to meet the chairman of EFG Private Bank at a Sunday Times Books party, and he had been the chairman of Faber and Faber, Matthew Evans, who was hugely supportive of what I was doing. And between us, we came up with the idea of a short story award, which EFG continued to fund with the Sunday Times. So it was one of those kind of strange, unpredictable shifts, because I think that established that particular prize, which is the biggest sort of single prize for a short story in the world. It's £30,000, which just rewards wonderful writing. There are amazing authors out there, and I've had the good fortune to judge some really good short story prizes and fiction prizes. And of course, there are lessons that good writers are taught about writing short stories. But the ones that stand out, I think, to me, are the ones that are taking risks, that may not be perfect, it may not be perfectly formed sentences, but really have got something to say, that are, if I say experimental, that's probably going too far, but people who aren't afraid of pushing the boundaries, and people who are poetic in how they think and visualise and write. So, if you go back to the Sunday Times Short Story Award, in the early years, one of the judges who I really enjoyed working with was A.S. Byatt. And she, I think I learned a lot watching her and talking to her about how to look at stories. And it was quite clear she loved people who were taking risks with their writing. So I was very proud in the early years that we could pick out people like Adam Marek and Will Cohue. They certainly weren't household names, they might not be now, but their writing really does take risks. So yes, I think that's important. So when I'm looking at who might come and read at the Word Factory, there are some people whose work is just so supremely good and out there that, I know that the audience are going to love them. And then there are other people that it is worth taking a risk on, who are just a little different. So when I left the Sunday Times, I started the Word Factory. We started to meet in the Society Club in Soho, which is a wonderful independent booksellers in Soho. And I just invited some great writers to come and read every month. And people gathered to hear those stories. And slowly, a community grew, which is now the Word Factory, which you can see online. And it's become something quite special, because we have our readings with sort of emerging and established authors, but we have a community who come together to just read short stories together in a short story club. We have mentoring of emerging writers, and everybody who's been involved gives something back. And of course we have this wonderful website now, which has got 3 years worth of amazing conversations and interviews and readings. Like David Constantine, I think I will always remember his passion for seeing writing as a very political act and drawing on people like D.H. Lawrence in his own work to illustrate that. Tessa Hadley, for an incredible eye for detail, and I think those of us who were at her class, she helped us just see into sort of the most minute things, and I think fragments of that have appeared in my own work and a lot of the work of the people who appeared in who came to that class. And I think the bigger things that you learn are not pursue this writing exercise, here's a quick tip. There's lots of that out there, but it's when somebody really shares something that's changed their own work. So I think those two people come to mind. And something that I learnt from Maureen Freely at Warwick University, which helped me untangle things, was to stop seeing things in a linear way, but to just write the things that you really feel are important, even if they don't seem to connect to anything else. And I really have to work at that, because as a journalist, you have a beginning, a middle, and an end in what you write. But untangling narrative and actually writing the important bits and then seeing a way of connecting them later, I think is also really useful. So when I left the Sunday Times, which, I've had a 30-year journalistic career, it appeared to me that there was an opportunity for me to be a bit braver and start to write my own things. And I had a book in mind, and I went to try and write that differently, non-journalistically, by doing an MA at Warwick University. But actually, deep down, the thing I'd always loved the most was poetry. And just hadn't allowed, I really thought that it was something that I almost wasn't allowed to do. And you'd have to get a psychologist in the room to explain that to you. But I'm sure I'm not alone. And when I got to Warwick, I decided to take a poetry module. And it was just like stepping into the playground. I mean, it was just fantastic. I loved it. The tutor was David Morley, who's a superb teacher. And I realised that's what I wanted to do. So I think I learnt that writing is about play after a lifetime of making writing about work. And that it's physical. And poetry is physical because you have to, there's a rhythm in it that comes from somewhere inside, I think. But when I think more broadly about what I've learnt about fiction writing as well, they're the same principles. They're kind of deep within, and they don't come. Things don't come because you say, I've got to write 500 words today or whatever. It's physical, gutsy, spiritual stuff. And that's very different to journalism. It's very different to copywriting or something like that. So you have to be in a different space. But when you look at the writing that talks about the senses, it comes alive. You see that writing comes alive. It's not just about what's in the head, but it's about all the detail of smell and the sensuality of life. That brings writing alive. And in that way, I think it's physical. And language itself is physical. And I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, so the rituals of the liturgy in the Mass, the way that things are sung and the way that things are said, and the effect that sound and music has on the body, all of this is fantastically physical stuff. But I think we often tell ourselves that writing is a cerebral, intellectual activity. I think the more you can shove that idea to one side, the better, because I think that disables people. They think they're not going to be good enough. So, and as for myself, I think it was the awareness of playing, and the awareness that the kind of, when you start to write, the beat and the sounds of things that you've absorbed almost unconsciously start to come through from reading I realised that, I've been reading poetry for years and years, and I can now see perhaps some of the people who've influenced me without me even realising, and music. And my dad, who worked in the car factories in Coventry, he'd come from Yorkshire to work there. He met my mum, who was Irish, in the mills in Halifax, and then they moved to Coventry, and I was born there. And I've written a pamphlet of sonnets, 15 linked sonnets, which is called A Crown of Sonnets, which is really about them. And it's called Black and Blue. So I'll just read you the first sonnet, Black and Blue. It's blacker than blue. Your hand is going black, I said. Me in one front room armchair, you in the other. A side table offering soccer book, specs, crossword from the Daily Mirror. It's not black, it's bloody blue, you said, and I'm not going back. We did. A bag containing razor, rosary, and all the weary rest, carried to yet another bed. It was as far as you went. Blue chair empty now, only the dent of your forearms left impressed, surrounded by the proud puzzles of your life. Photos of grandchildren's confirmations, the wife who died too soon, consolation in beer and Radio 5 Live. I see you young and alone, doing what's right, washing my schoolgirl's socks by hand, whiter than white.
For more updates and videos, either follow Inky Dumbbell's YouTube channel or follow me on Twitter @RowanHLB. See you soon.